A yellow flag is a yellow flag. It's not a red flag. All right. Red flags are no, stop, out, I'm done. On this series of the Seats to Streets podcast, we tackle something that every church has to deal with. That's hiring ministry staff and filling open positions. And this series called Hiring Ministry Staff Made Easy, we want to look at a few things. We want to look at the current way we're doing it. Maybe it's a little broken. We also want to look at a cultural fit of the church, and then something new, maybe you've never heard of, that we call a yellow flag interview, that we'd like to give you those tools. So glad that you're here with us to be able to experience what this series is about. But first, before we go, I want to tell you about our sponsor for the Seats to Streets podcast. That's Pioneer Bible Translators. With prayer as their strategy, PBT wants to see transformed lives through God's word in every language, including deaf. Our deaf brothers and sisters. Be sure to go over to pioneerbible.org and check them out. But for now, enjoy this series. Hey, welcome back to the Seats to Streets podcast. I'm your host, J.R. Horn. That guy's Brian Gorman. And we're back to be able to walk through this series that we're titling Hiring Church Staff Made Easy. When we look at church staff, when we look at lead ministers in specifically, oftentimes your church is most likely set up in the governance that the lead minister is required for searching for, attracting, onboarding, and hiring the staff, as well as in an unfortunate event, a firing of a staff. But we're going to talk about hiring in this series. And we've already been talking about what does it look like? How can we make this a little easier? What is a better format? If you've missed last week's episode on culture before theology, we'd love for you to go back. Matter of fact, if you're on this one and you haven't watched that one, just pause this, go back 2 episodes, watch the beginning episode, watch the second episode of Culture Before Theology, so that you could be set up for this, because these are some key high-level aspects of making sure that your next staff hire is more successful than what you have seen in the past. So our goal at Seats to Streets is to help you to create committed, growing disciple makers. And we know that when you hire correctly, when you can ensure that mom and dad don't fight, that you can make committed, growing disciple makers in a much higher capacity than what you've done before. So today, Brian, we're gonna play around a little bit, because this is a topic that we love. It is so fun to walk a church through, but it's scary. It's really scary. It's called the yellow flag interview. Brian, really quickly in 30 seconds, what is a yellow flag interview?
The yellow flag interview is where you are looking at the different concerns that have come up throughout the interview process. You're asking really direct questions to determine, is this a yellow flag? Hey, we just want to slow down and look at it. Or it's just going to be this thing we're going to always deal with. Is it like, oh, we misunderstood, it's a green flag? Or is it, no. Damage and fear and road out ahead, red flag, stop, do not go any further. And so that's the point of it, is it's just this extremely clarifying interview.
So to set the stage, let me give you 2 things. One, this yellow flag interview is about the last step. You've walked through your process. You've talked to this candidate. You've talked about culture. You've talked about theology. You talked about job performance and the job specific. You've asked your specific questions to yourself. Can they do the job here? Do they fit? Do we align theologically? Will they follow? Will our people follow them? You've already gone through and had on-sites. This is it. This is the one where you walk in and you put your rocks on the table and say, we need to have a conversation about these 3 things before I slide a job offer your way. All right. So this is the last one. This is the stopgap right here. Here's the second one. A yellow flag is a yellow flag. It's not a red flag. All right. Red flags are no, stop, out, I'm done. Right. And there's even some really cool stuff that we'll even teach you and walk you through your church of how you can hold a red flag and you can give a candidate a red flag. Could love them enough to give them that as well. That's not today. Today's about yellow flag interview. A yellow flag's a yellow flag. A yellow flag means, hold up, we got something to talk about, but the game will go on. All right. That is what a yellow flag's about. It's not a no. Reds are no. Yellows are, we should talk about this together, very pointed and very directly. And actually, Brian has got a fantastic format that we walk churches through on how to use. So, Brian, walk us through in more detail, what is a yellow flag interview?
So I'm going to give you the simple overview of how it works. I'm going to ask you a question, and then you're going to ask me a question. I'm going to ask you a question. You're going to ask me. I'm going to ask you. You're going to ask me. It's really that simple. It's 3 questions from me, 3 questions from you. That's all this thing's about. But those 3 questions, they are big deals. And this is what makes people uncomfortable with this to begin with. So I want to start actually, because I'm afraid if I tell you the process to it, that you'll go, yep, I'm done. I want to tell you what we're looking for first and why this is so important. And then we'll deal with like the specifics of how to get there. But we're looking for 3 things throughout the course of this interview, right? In every interview we talk about, there's 3 things that come up. There are 3 purposes of this particular interview. The first purpose is we are going to learn about how they receive hard questions, right? We're going to learn about their receptiveness, how they take that thing in, right? We talk to people here that if someone asks you a hard question, you receive that with like a medicine ball. You got to give a little in that question because we want these questions to be defined enough, pointed enough, heavy enough that we're going to see, do they immediately become defensive? Because if they do, that might be a really unfortunate fit for our environment. Do they immediately cower? It might be a poor fit for our environment. It might not be, depends on what you're looking for. But we want to know how they receive the strength of the questions we're going to ask. This is valuable, not just in the interview process, it's valuable in how you have to deal feedback to this person. It's valuable in how they're going to interact with your congregation. It's valuable in their ability to make adjustments and changes throughout the course of their ministry and their life cycle in your church. Receptiveness is a big deal. Then, second purpose is their response. How do they answer the question? I'm not going to ask you a question if I don't want you to give a good answer to it.
Right.
And so there have been times where I've asked a yellow flag question and they have come back and they have responded in such a way that it completely alleviated my concerns. There's other times I've asked a yellow flag question. They just gave me another yellow flag in the answer, but at least I go, okay, I don't love it, but I'm okay with it. And there are times I've given a yellow flag and their response just proved that it should have been a red.
Yep.
So their answers, and again, we'll give you some details and specifics in a moment, but I want you to understand, you're going to learn a lot from this. This interview, the most pointed, asking a clear question kind of interview. And then the third one, and this for me personally, is actually the big one to me, is I want to know the candidate's question. I want to know what they're willing to ask back. Because I want to know, for my culture and my environment, it matters to me that people are willing to ask hard questions, that they're willing to be direct and honest in the conversations we have. And so the question they ask me back, and sometimes it's not even a question they ask me, sometimes it's a question they've asked somebody else in the room. Like that question to me really stands out because this is this is the big deal. I'm not giving you an offer until I know, can you handle the 3 questions I'm going to ask? Can you respond to the 3 questions I'm going to ask? And do you have enough love and concern for yourself and for our future to ask good questions back? Now, to do that, here's very simply how it's going to work. I'm going to warn a candidate early in the process that this interview is coming up. Once
so this is a
made
part
it through.
You've already talked to them. You've
Yes.
given them prep that this is going to be a part of this process. And if you make it to it, here's an overview really quickly of this last stopgap meeting. So they're aware of it.
Yes.
And they know that you're going to ask 3 and they're expected to bring 3. Okay.
And they understand the criteria, their response, their reception, and their question. They understand this is what we're looking for in this interview. I will sometimes tell them that in the very first 30-minute phone call. Hey, this is the process we're going to go through with you. If I like them and I think there's a chance they make it there, here's the process we're going to be going through. I would encourage you to start paying attention now. So you have 3 good questions when you get there. Hey, and before that interview happens, it is not uncommon for me to even give them, I'm going to give you about an hour to go talk to your spouse, hour and a half, to have some time alone, to think through this, to pray through this, to talk to some of your advisors and some of your mentors about this, because I want you to be prepared for this. This is a make or break. And I give them that time, but they are warned about that way in advance, so you have the time to do it. Once we sit down, I am going to ask them my first question, and it will be on any topic based upon the yellow flags we've seen. So it might be that I'm concerned about a theological topic. It might be I'm concerned about a cultural fit. It might be that I'm concerned about their effectiveness in doing the job. It might be a personality. It might be just something that they said that didn't quite sit right. I'm going to give you some examples so you know how defined I'm talking, but please know this is my culture. This may not fly in your culture, right? But I'm going to give you some examples so you know what I mean by pointed, heavy questions. One person we looked at, we had talked to for some period of time. We thought they had all the skills to do the job. The only thing that concerned us, or one of the big things that concerned us, was we had never really heard them tell a joke or a funny story, or everything was so serious the entire time. And so we pointed out, everything has been very serious. Now, I will tell you this, when I do this interview, only one person asks the questions. Everyone else is listening, but only one person's asking. And I said, everything you've done is so serious. I'm a little concerned that you don't have much of a sense of humor. And that's really going to be important to us. Again, now notice, I'm asking a question that comes across almost rude. My culture, that would be okay. Your culture, it may not be. So, hey, I don't know that you have a sense of humor. Tell me a joke. And that was the question.
One time I wished for a big orange ball for a head. And
if they told me that joke, they'd hire. There was 2 horses standing out in the field, and there was a Herman and there was a Berman.
Berman.
You tell me the right joke.
Call everybody off. This guy, this person, I'm in.
Another person we looked at. Oh, yeah.
Brian, hang on. Why in the world, I'm, again, playing devil's advocate, I'm listening to our audience here, right? Why in the world would you have not asked that question during that interview time? Why wait to the yellow flag interview?
One, I want to give them every opportunity to succeed on their own. I would even toss up some things to see if it could come out. But the other one is, I want this interview to be challenging. So I will hold on to a few things that are right at the end, because I want this to be challenging for this person. I want them to have to deal with hard questions, because what I know is when you're working as a minister in the church, people are going to confront you in challenging ways. I need to know how they receive that. I need to know how they're going to handle it when if they're in youth ministry, when this mom comes walking up with their kid and I can't believe you told my child, and they need to be able to handle that. They need to be able to handle, you haven't been paying enough attention to. They've got to be able to handle that. I need them to be able to handle hard questions. So I would hold off on some of these questions. And some of them are the kind of questions you wouldn't ask in a normal interview. I looked at one person and I said, from something you mentioned, and it was one thing they mentioned one time, you mentioned that you had a family member that it took them almost 7 years in your last church to really begin to make friends. How's that going to work here?
Right.
Are they able to make friends, and what impact is that going to have on on the ministry you run? So, pointed question about this family member, right? That would be in there. One person, we sat and said, throughout the course of this, you have often told us how excited you are about the opportunity to work here and the different things that you believe we can bring to you. I don't know that I've heard anything about what you're going to bring to us in relation to your strengths. So I've heard a lot about us providing for you and your development, but what are you going to do to develop us? One candidate, this one I didn't catch. And this is why, and we'll deal with some tips and tricks in a minute, but this is one of those will be getting multiple voices involved in helping decide these 3 questions.
Yeah.
The whole time this person was there, they were knocking out of the park. Everything was going great. And I was building this great rapport with them. And some other people on my staff said, Brian, have you noticed that he hasn't talked to us about our family, about our life, about anything related to us? He only wants you. Like,
Yep.
Ooh, you make an excellent point. And then I started listening for it, because at the end of every interview process, we will stop and go, what were the yellow flags? So we just see if there are any that repeat themselves, and we kind of come back at it for this interview.
Mm-hmm.
And we went, hey, I think that you're concerned about me because, I can get you the job, but we need someone that's concerned about our staff. Tell me why you haven't done that. And their answer was, no, that's great. You're right. That you are the one I've been concerned about. I haven't been concerned about the staff. And went on, and I went, well, we're good with this interview, right? Because that's not going to be a good fit for us. That's a big, those are some of the questions I ask. One of the questions that got asked back, in fact, one of the guys on my staff right now, who I am so excited we hired, and I say we hired him because of one question he asked us, is he sat there and said, I think it was his third and final question, hey guys, this is my staff and one of my elders. Brian says that he wants really direct, open, honest conversations, that we need to be able to push back on him and be able to really provide that kind of clarity. I've heard guys say that before. I just don't know if it's true. Tell me the worst character trait of him. What's Brian's worst character trait? What's the area that he fails in the most? I want to see if we can be honest about it. And I clapped out loud because the question was so good to me, because it was so...
He caught the vibe.
Beautifully
he caught the culture.
Confrontational. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's the answer. Yes. Let's answer that question. And part of what made it for him was everybody answered the question. He's sitting there watching me, and I'm like, no, that's a great point. Right. And
that's
we get
really
done
good.
with this question, and people were pointing, and they went, and he goes, none of that seemed like it surprised anybody here. And they're like, everyone in the room went, we've told him this before. And he goes, we've heard all of that? I'm like, every piece of it. Yeah, we're
we'll tell
good.
We'll tell him again on his year-end review. It's okay.
Right. That's what makes this beautiful, is this one will give you more insight to the culture than anything else you can possibly do. It's just, and it's just simply, how do they receive the question? How do they respond to the question? And what question do they ask you? But it takes some time to get to know the candidate before you get there. So I'm telling you what I'm saying about this, and I know this is tough. Every time we've ever talked to someone about this interview, they love the idea till they're the one having to ask the question.
Until they are sitting across the table. It's like,
yeah. And you got to look a guy in the eye and go, I don't know that you have a sense of humor.
Tell me
a
joke.
Yes. JR, you were in the meeting. You remember me doing it.
I know. And it was painful.
It is. We ask some really crazy pointed questions, but man, do we walk out of that. Every person who's ever gone through this interview process with us, hear me on this one. Every person who's ever gone through this interview process with us has said that moment, that interview, that section was the greatest experience they've ever gone through in any interview process with any church. It provided clarity to them and to us. It is a beautifully loving, carefronting, we're not confronting, carefronting way to make sure we're a good fit for each other. Because part of it is most ministers I know are really bad about interviewing the church. They're good about being interviewed, but they're bad about asking, am I a good fit here? And this forces them to think that way.
So let me ask you some questions. We've got the framework. It's 3 questions for the interviewer, 3 questions for the interviewee, or church and candidate. It's an A, a B. I ask you a question, you give me an answer. You ask me a question, I give you an answer. All the way down. 3. Here's a couple of questions. 1, what happens when you ask your question, the candidate responds, and they have not provided any questions to reciprocate back?
This is a rarity for me, and it's about the only interview that I feel this way in. I will always let this interview go to completion. Now, we mentioned the yellow flag versus red flag.
Right.
In the other interviews, if somebody answers something that is flat out red flag, we'll ask some follow-up questions, and then that interview will be done. There's no need to keep going. And again, we'll talk to you later about how to go about that in a kind and loving way. This is the one interview I'm going to finish. I'm going to ask you my 3 questions, even if you ask me nothing back. But the fact that you ask me nothing back is the red flag that tells me we're done. That for me and for my culture. Again,
Right.
you're trying to find your culture, right? One of your I'll tell you what my 3rd yellow flag would be is we warned you that this was going to be there, and you came in with no questions.
0, none.
That tells me, is that because you can't follow directions? Or is that because you don't have the ability to think critically to know what's healthy? Now, yes, Brian will ask a question about that. This is the absolute, I'm telling you, if you're ever in the situation with me, it is the rudest I will ever be to you in any setting we will ever walk into.
Well, I think all my candidates for First Christian Church just backed out.
But, and it's not because I'm trying to be a jerk. I'm just trying to be really, really clear. But clarity can be challenging to people. And so I'm going to ask an abundantly clear question. I'm not trying to be rude. It's not intentionally rude. It's just you're not used to being asked a question like that.
This is a marriage. Let's, I'm going to steal Brian's phrase. Let's play around in reality. This is a marriage.
Yes.
This is something that is long lasting, right? We should be upset that we still see many youth ministry candidates not make it to their 24-month anniversary at a church. I'm hiring for a youth ministry position here in Kentucky, and every time I get a candidate that has multiple ministry positions under 3 years, I let them know, for me, that's a yellow flag. You need to look at this and this and this. When we get to this part of the interview process, I suggest you hone in on that and start asking questions as to why. Now, I'll be honest with you, there was one candidate. I've only met one candidate so far in this entire search process with that resume that has had acceptable answers. Only one, right? So because every candidate thinks they have it. They think they have the acceptable answer. And I'll be honest with you, if you're on your 7th ministry and you're 15 years out of college and it was always your boss, like meaning you were an associate minister and your lead minister was the reason why you left, or you're a lead minister and it was the elders is the reason why you left. I think the least common denominator here is actually you and not the leadership. Yeah. But this is where, now you may go into that detail into that part of the job or in that part of the app or the interview process, but also this is where in that yellow flag interview where you could get that pointed to go, okay, when I asked you this question earlier, I didn't receive a satisfactory answer. So I'm going to ask it a little bit deeper. Why in the world have you worked at 7 churches in 15 years? Okay. Maybe take a little more, be a bit more serious about than that, but that's the point of this yellow flag. So
it is.
Go ahead. I got another question, but go ahead.
Well, give me the question. Let's go for it.
You started on it. You started answering my second question. And the question is, when does a yellow flag turn into a red flag? So you gave one quantifying answer in that yellow flag meeting. If they have no questions coming back, there's a yellow flag. But when do those yellow flags turn into red flags? And how many red flags do you need before you go out?
I only need one red flag.
Yeah.
Right. Think about it. You said a marriage. It's a good example, right? If you're dating someone and you're like, this person's amazing. I mean, they snort some coke on occasion, but other than that, no, that's red. Boop, we're done. Conversation's kind of finished. And for me, may not be for you. I don't know. Right. That's for each person to figure out. So with that in mind, one of the things that we do when we try to build the 3 questions is we ask, what's the red flag answer to this?
Yep.
Now, if they don't have an answer to it, that's the red flag. Immediately, that's the red flag. If they answer defensively, that's the red flag. If they are off-putting, right? That's the red flag. But with every question, we have a couple of things. Like if they say these things, Yeah, red flag. We're kind of done.
We're done.
One
Yeah.
question we asked, I believe we actually asked this question. I remember we discussed it, but I believe we actually asked it, is we asked something along the lines of, um, based upon, and we have some proof text for it, based upon these things, we believe that there is an extremely codependent relationship um, between your family and your mother or mother-in-law. And we're going to make a pretty big gap of distance between where they live and you live. We're concerned that that will pull you back within a few years. Can you speak to that?
Mm-hmm.
And I believe the answer came back something along the lines of, well, I don't know. We've never really lived that far away, so I can't really answer for how that will work out. Oh, ding 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 ding, buzzers, buzzers, buzzers. Yep, that's a lot of red.
Yeah, it's
Even
red.
if
It's red
everything
because
else was right.
yeah, it's red because they don't see the potential of that being a problem and haven't worked that out to going, what does it look like when when I'm grown and flown here to
Yeah.
see how is this going to work? So, Brian, is there anything else you want to share before I jump into some quick tips to be able to help a church have an understanding of how do we go about getting ready for this and what do we do? Is there anything last wrapping up about the actual process of the yellow flag interview?
Yes. Take a deep breath before you do it. I know it's tough. We know, like, churches, here's how this is going to work out. As you're listening to us and you're going to go, my hope is you're going, that makes a lot of sense. I just don't know if I can do it. But God causes people to do hard things.
Yeah.
And if you were looking to get married again, you'd ask the hard questions before you put this person in front of your kids. You're definitely going to ask the hard questions before you ask them to babysit your kids. And in this situation, you're looking to get married to someone, and they are going to be intimately involved with the children that you have, that God has given you to steward. I know this will be hard. I know even as you go into it, you'll want to back out of it. Be strong. Take a deep breath. And you can do this. When it's done, everyone will breathe a sigh of relief. I walked out of many of these meetings, put my arm around them, like, whoo, that's horrible, isn't it? Yes, it is. Man, you did a great job in that. I love these questions. And we get that. That's the one interview where I'm going to give you immediate feedback because I want you to feel better as soon as we walk out. We are not going to let you sit on that information because I want you to know we're good. Yeah. We are good. Even if we didn't agree on some things, we're still good. So I give a lot of immediate feedback to this one, but that's what I would share.
Cool. Awesome. Well, here, I want to give you just a real quick, a couple nuggets just to be able to say, well, how do I get ready for this? What do I do? What are some of the other factors in conducting a yellow flag interview that maybe not be so process driven about handling, conducting the actual interview? So Brian's already hit one. You need to gather all the flags, all the yellow flags. Ideally, so that you are not the only person in the room interviewing all these candidates. You've got other people in the room, maybe someone who is a power person, someone who is a people person that they're going to feel the feelings of people and read the room. You got someone in there's a playful person. You've got the planner in there that goes, oh, hang on, they went 30 seconds over that time frame. The list maker, because they're going to have great perspectives on those answers. All the four types of people that are there are going to hear it different ways, which is why Brian was pointed out. It's like, did you notice that when they don't ask us about our family because a different personality type, a different people type, a different communicative type person went, hey, this is what we noticed. So gather all the flags. Now this one's easy. Trust your gut. Like you've done this for a while. Like you've been in there. Even if you haven't done it for a while, you've done enough research. You're not shooting from the hip here. Plus, you've had all these other interviews beforehand. You've had the culture interview. You've had the job specific interview. You've had the theology interview. They've already been on site, and you've had the interviews in front of other people to answer the question, will my people follow this person? Trust your gut. What are the things that you continue to come back to? What are the things that you hear from other people, right? And then going, I knew it. I knew we got to make this a yellow flag question. And don't forget, the reason why we start with culture. Are they a good fit here? Will they culturally fit? That is the whole that alone is the reason why Brian conducts yellow flag interviews the way he does. The three questions back and forth, you can conduct them in your own the own lens of your own culture of your church. But in order for answer the question, are they really going to be a good fit here? The culture of the church was spread over top the yellow flag interview, and that's how Brian used it. That's why he's direct. That's also why as soon as he's done, he immediately goes and picks them back up, because they know it's hard and they want to make sure they are not just drowning someone in the culture. You're going to take time to get in there. But here's another one. Last one. Andy Stanley coined the phrase attention to manage and problem to solve. Right? Is attention to manage or a problem to solve? And asking these questions to yourself and your search committee will help you formulate the yellow flag questions. They continue to do this. You see them doing this in every interview. Is that going to be a problem that you have to have solved for them to be on staff? Or is that a tension you are going to have to manage, but you're going to make it very direct and clear in that yellow flag interview that how we manage this tension is conducive of either a job offer or a yellow flag. So we kind of have to have all of these kind of wrapped up in one to be able to prepare for that yellow flag interview. Go ahead, Brian.
Piggyback off of kind of a Dave Ramsey-ish type statement, right? If you live like no one else, you can live like no one else. Right. I'm telling you, other churches don't do this at this interview. If you want candidates no one else can get, do the things nobody else is going to do to get them. This will get you a better long-term fit, a substantially better long-term fit, and you will be able to build a healthier staff culture because of it. If you're willing to do this hard work, 90 minutes, it's a 90-minute interview, 90 minutes, hard work, clear and done. Whew, we all breathe and everybody gets better.
Yeah, because every church I've worked with at some point in time, when you ask the search committee, hey, what do you think about this candidate? Every church I've worked with, inevitably someone will come back and say, yeah, they're good enough. That's not what we want to do. We want to do things differently because this is a marriage. This is long-term. We got things to do. People need to know the gospel. So we hope this has been impactful for you. This is a very extremely fun subject for us. We love doing this. We love helping churches understand how to hire church staff in an easier way. It doesn't have to be so complicated. And part of the complexity is how and what subjects do we ask questions about when? That's the big deal. So that's why we have laid out our structure to be able to help you have that, with the yellow flag interview being an ideal process that must be a part of that strategy. So we hope this has helped you today. If you want to reach out to us and to learn more about that ideal church staff hiring process, you can connect with us at seatstostreets.com. Click on the Connect tab and fill out the info box. We would love to get in touch with you to make sure that you're prepared to create committed, growing disciple makers at your church. So we'll see you next week. Take care, folks.